Was it slightly before this? I don't know.
No, this one. We
I think
spoke
it was
about
around
the
this place.
consequences of sin. And the idea was
Yes,
that
yes.
actually we cannot say that it is like punishment. Of course, it is a kind of punishment. But what is important here, we can see that this punishment doesn't stop the blessing that was pronounced earlier. So that is why we can see that by punishing them, God still reaffirms the blessings that were pronounced while the people were created. Okay, so now let us discuss one more issue. Yeah, God didn't remove the original blessing from the people. They can still multiply, they can still subdue the land. It means that God's sentence is a kind of confirmation of the original blessing. But because of sin, those blessings are changed. So they have something like an idea of punishment anyway is present here. Now I would like to discuss with you this verse. Vayomer Adonai Elohim, hen ha'adam haya ke'echad mimenu, ledat tov vara. Va'ata pen ishlach yado, velakach gam me'etz ha'chayim, ve'achal ve'hay le'olam. So, and the Lord God said, behold, a man, or the man, Adam, yes. And here the question how to translate this haya. Usually it is translated as become. Behold, a man become, or the man become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now, lest he send his hand and take, and also take from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So this is the verse. And if you remember, I mentioned to you that it could be translated in both ways. So it could be translated as haya, could be translated as was, or could be translated as become. So let us see how is it possible to translate it as was, because most of the people translate it as become. So there are two options for us, and everything depends. I'll look again at this slide. Do you see, again, I will try to translate for you. Behold, a man, or the man become or was like one of us. And now the problem is with this sentence. How shall we treat this sentence? Lada'at tov vara. So this lada'at is infinitive construct. And tov vara, it's clear, good and evil. So, but how shall we translate this infinitive construct? And there are several options how we can do this. The first one, we can translate it as a purpose clause. If it is a purpose clause, then it expresses a purpose of the main verb and could be translated like Adam was one of us in order to know ledat, good and evil. So this is one way how we can translate it. Another way how we can translate it is as a result clause. Then it expresses a consequence of the main verb and should be translated like this. Adam became as one of us so that he knows good and evil. Okay? Adam was like one of us in order to know good and evil, and Adam became as one of us that he knows good and evil. So is it clear? The problem of the translation of this verse?
Yes, but it appears each of them has implications.
Of course. Both of them have very important theological implications. So if we look like this, so Adam became as one of us so that he knows good and evil. So in this case, it is not clear how Adam became as one of us. Okay, and in this case, it looks like Satan or serpent was right when he said, God knows that in the day when you eat from the fruit of the tree, you will be like gods, Ke Elohim. Okay, so if we take this one, so it means that Adam was one of us in the very beginning, and the purpose of being one of us is to know good and evil. So it looks like God wanted Adam to know good and evil, but probably in a different way. But now Adam became, yes, but in this case, if we just go back, so let's try to translate. Let's try to translate the whole sentence. And God said, behold, Adam, was one of us in order to know good and evil. And now, lest he sent his hand and took from the tree of life and eat and live forever. But if you took another translation, so this is one that is known to us, and God said, behold, Adam became as one of us, knowing, or so became as one of us because he knows good and evil. And now, lest he sent his hand and took from the tree of life and eat and live forever. So I just want to ask you, what do you think? Which translation is more reasonable? Just what do you think about it?
Prof, for me, I think the former one, Adam was one like us, is more consistent to the creation dream than the latter, which is commonly translated nowadays. I'm saying so because God said he created Adam in his own image.
Mm-hmm.
And because he created in his own image, by that alone, he was like one of them to some extent. So because he was like one of them and he was obeying him, he knew what evil is and what good is. It may not be to the extent that God knows, but I believe he had some pre-fall knowledge, which he lost when he fell. That to me appears consistent to the entire theme than the latter. The latter gives us more problems than this former. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you for your opinion.
Professor,
yes.
Just to help me understand more, what if we took Haya, we just leave it as Carl perfect, it's third person masculine. And then Lada'at, we just leave it. I saw there's somewhere I did not understand you. You said if we take Haya to be worse, then we'll have a problem of rendering of Lada'at.
No, in any case, the problem, it doesn't matter how we translate Haya. So the main problem is how we translate Lada'at.
Yeah, and that is where I want you to help me.
Yes, so because
what is the problem with Lada'at?
Yes, let's try to read it. Behold, Adam was or become, doesn't matter, as one of us. So how shall we translate this infinitive construct? Lada'at.
I say knowing.
Knowing. But yes. In this case, why do you translate it knowing if we have lamet here?
Okay, to know.
Yes, so lamet usually, the usual translation is to know. So knowing is a kind of, yes, it would be also infinitive construct, knowing, but I think that in this case, infinitive construct should be without lamed.
Okay. And it cannot be translated without the lamed, just knowing.
Okay, so let us do like this.
So that we eliminate the problem of ladder art, we remain with the problem of Haya.
Yeah. So
then Ogembo's translation will come in automatically.
Yeah. Just a minute, please. Just yeah, this is Walker Connor book, Introduction to Biblical Hebrew Syntax, and they have the entire section, and the entire section is about how to translate or what kind of function in the sentence infinitive plus lamed could have. The combination of lamed plus infinitive construct is common in a variety of uses. Some are similar to those of the infinitive without preposition, while others are specialized along the lines of infinitive clauses with bet and kaf and other prepositions. So he says about several options how we can translate infinitive plus lamed. The combination can be found in any nominal role or in clause, like to praise Yahweh is God. So it's not our case, definitely. Yes, so you just infinitive with lamed can also serve as a verbal complement, supplying a verb to complete the main finite verb. And he gives some examples. He was afraid to stay. So he was in this, or he became to, yes? So this is one like complement of the verb. But yeah, maybe it is possible. But yeah, maybe it's one of the options. Okay, infinitive clauses with lamed are various types. Some of the types are analogous to those formed with other prepositions. Okay, purpose, result, and temporal clauses of phrases can be seen as serving the role of verbal complements. So in order to listen to the wisdom of Solomon. So this is the purpose, or so this is the purpose, yes? A variant, we can translate it as a clause, as a purpose clause, in order to. The line of demarcation between the purpose infinitive clause and the complementary infinitive is somewhat blurred. So of course, it is very, very similar. So Laban went to share. So it could be a complement and it could be a purpose. The subject of the infinitive may be subject of the main verb. And that came out to confront you. So this is result clauses. Yes, so let's look at the result clauses. A consequence of the main verb, by doing evil in Yahweh's eyes and so provoking him. So this is the variant that I would suggest for become. So the man was or become like one of us, so he knows good in evil. So in this case, lada'at or infinitive plus lamed is a result of the main verb. He became like one of us, and the result of being one of us, he knows good and evil. So temporal, no, most probably temporal doesn't fit this. Because I don't think it is temporal. Gerundiv, yes. Shamor et Yom HaShabbat lekadasho. By. The man become or was one of us by knowing. So it's very clear, it's very close to the result. Are you with me?
Yes, Professor. We are together.
Modal, I don't think it is modal. Modal meaning the immanent sense of the infinity with Lamed. We'll say, I don't think it is also an option. So do you see among all the options that Walke and O'Connor mention, we have most like fitting the best are two. Either it is a purpose or it is a result. Okay? Are you with me? Is it clear what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yes.
it is either a purpose or result. Behold Adam, and if we translate it as a purpose, so it is better to translate it as was, because it doesn't make sense become. Behold Adam become like one of us in order to know good and evil. Does it make sense? Become like one of us in order to know.
I think it's awkward in English.
It's very awkward, yes. So it doesn't make sense in English.
Unless
so
if Adam was...
They translated lada'at like knowing. So in this case, it is just like, I don't know how to explain it, but something. But that is why it's very similar to the result. So he became like one of us so that he knows. And the result of this becoming like one of us is the knowledge of good and evil.
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
Can we look again at the K-Ehad? I mean,
what?
Like one of us, no, K-Ehad Mimenu, like one of us or like one from us.
Oh yeah, good. I like your idea. So like,
yes.
like
one from us.
Ke'echat mimenu, like one from us.
From us. You know, from us implies a kind of separation from us. You know?
Ke'echat from us.
From us. That means he has left us. I don't know. And the result that he has now known good and evil, because separation from God involves knowing good and evil. It involves sin. Although I need to study hard to know if there's an implied definite article. I don't know.
No, I don't think the article should be here.
Okay.
Because so ahad is already like a definite.
Okay. Like one from us, or moving away from us.
Yeah. Or maybe indefinite. Ahad,
indefinite.
Like indefinite, like English A.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my thought, Prof. Because if it's like one from us, there's an implied moving away from what.
Yeah,
what
but
because
do you see here? It's clear that some comparison is implied because of this kaf preposition. Ke ahad.
yeah,
like one,
like yes,
like one.
from us, like one of us. Okay.
So probably we need to look again at this expression. Maybe we can find some other like ka with something, or ke hat mimenu. Let us see, maybe we can find something. So this is
Okay, Prof.
C22. Ke echat mimenu. Yeah, it happens 4 times, the exact phrase, but I believe some of them are the repetition. Like, for example, 1 Samuel 17:36. Let me. Your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them. Yeah? For he has defiled the armies of the living God. Echat, yeah, here. Echat mechem. Echat mechem. Okay. Obadiah, on the day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers carried off his wealth and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots of Jerusalem, you were like one of them. And Chronicles, and the messenger who went to summon Micaiah said to him, behold, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them. So most probably, yeah, we cannot translate it differently. It is like one of us, like one of us. Okay. Another interesting, if you want to just to go deeper in this direction, another interesting way to look for meaning of this sentence is to understand what does tov vara means. What does it mean? Tov vara, good and evil. Because do you see the same phrase occurs very often in the Hebrew Bible, to know good and evil. Like, for example, one time, and yes, it's better to understand, is it like a positive sense or negative sense? Because sometimes it is given in positive sense, sometimes it is not very clear. So, for example, do you remember Solomon was praying and he was asking the heart that can discern good from evil. The heart that can discern good from evil. So it was his request to God. So recently we studied in the book of Isaiah. Do you remember about this son who is supposed to be born? And this phrase is also very often occurs in this context. Before he discerns between good and evil. Yes. One time it is applied to, I forgot the name of this character in the Bible. So do you remember when David was pursued by his son Absalom and he left Jerusalem, one person who was very old, and he said, I cannot go with you. So he couldn't go with David. And he said why he couldn't go with David, because he said that I am very old and I cannot discern between good and evil.
That was Barzillai.
Yeah, Basilai, yeah, correct. His name is Basilai. I cannot discern between good and evil. And sometimes I heard this interpretation that good and evil is related. And do you remember Blosher also says about that good and evil, the sin of Adam and Eve was related to sexual intercourse, whatever. Because sometimes they say that, do you see, good and evil is related to intimacy between man and woman. Why? Because do you see this child who is supposed to be born, before he starts to understand what is good and evil, and an old man who says, I cannot understand, I cannot discern between good and evil. So it's clear the child, of course, is not sexually mature, and the old man is already in the age when he cannot perform like this function. So in this case, people say that knowing good and evil is related to some sexual relationship. But of course, I don't think it is true. We cannot say about that good and evil is about that. It is clearly, it is not about sexual relationship in this context. So that is why it's not an easy way to translate this sentence. I don't want you to cling to one translation to another. I just wanted to think with you together about possible ways how we can translate the same this verse. Okay? Any other comments from you about that?
How does the Greek put it?
Oh, good question. Let me see. Yeah, we can see how it was interpreted by others. It's a good idea. $3.22, yes. Okay, who of you are good in Greek? Just a minute. Yeah, this is the translation. Oh, yeah, Greek translation. Behold, Adam, gegonen. Gegonen. So definitely Greek is become, yes. Hos eis hex hemon. To genoskein, but they translated to genoskein. Kalon kai poneron. Kanun mepote ekteine tenhera, kai labe tuxulo tes zoes kai fage kai zesete eston aiona. So the Greek translation translated as become. Idu Adam become. Would you like to look at some other translations? So maybe we can look at Targum.
LXX can be the same as...
Or maybe you have it in your Bible Works. Maybe somebody can project Bible Works with the Targum. Because I don't have in accordance by Targum in accordance. I need to go to some other website to look at Targum. And do you have it? Pastor Bioma. I know that you are good with the Bible works.
Yeah, Prof, let me check.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going there now.
And while you are checking, I just want to look at Jewish commentaries. Yeah, Rashi translated like become, and the sense it's like become. Okay, so we said that two variants are possible. Now, let us look at the exile from paradise. So we can see here that before God says, lest Adam send your hand or stretch your hand to take from the tree, and the same verb shalach is used here, and sent is the same word as used, and the same word is used when Abraham sends out Ishmael. The same word is used when the scapegoat is sent to the desert. Another word, garash, is even stronger, a word that describes the expulsion of Cain, that the same word Sarah uses when he calls Abraham to get, when she calls Abraham to get rid of Hagar. Yeah, so God sent them away from the Garden of Eden. And this idea is very common in the entire Pentateuch. So do you see the land, the Garden of Eden, is given to people, but it is given to the people on the condition of being faithful to God. We saw that the promised land is a kind of symbol of the Garden of Eden. And the promised land is also given to the people only on the condition to be faithful. And when the people are not faithful, they lose the land, and they had to go to the exile, and they lost the land. So, but when he sent them away from the land, yes, he provided this skin tunic, and the words that are used there are very, very interesting, because there are two words like or and ketonet. Or is like a skin, and ketonet is some like a tunic or something kind of garment. And it is clear that this garment that is provided by God is opposite, or is in contrast with the garment that they made themselves for themselves when they made it from the fig leaves. And God provided another cover or something else to cover them from their nakedness. And of course, this verse is very, very important, and this place is very, very important because do you see many people say that God didn't tell true when he said that in the day when you eat from the fruit of the tree, you will surely die, because Adam and Eve didn't die at that day. And this place, by some commentators, is understood as something related to the soul. So do you see, people didn't die, and this idea that the soul is immortal, maybe it could be traced to here as well. But the idea of this text is the following. Of course, Adam and Eve didn't die, but somebody else died for them. And this was a sacrifice, animal sacrifice. So the skin tunic is the best reference, I believe, to the fact that at that day, the sacrifice was brought, was offered for the sin of first people. So it was clear for them, if there is a sin, the punishment is death. Somebody should die for the sin. At that time, the animal died, but of course, it is not the animal who can expiate the sins of the mankind. So now I just want to ask you a simple question. So what do you think? What sacrifice was offered by God in this case, or by Adam? So we don't know. We just see that God made a skin garment for them. But what kind of sacrifice it's supposed to be? Your ideas. Anybody?
Did I hear your question correctly?
So we know that there are several types of sacrifice in Israel, like burnt offering, sin offering, guilt offering, peace offering, grain offering. Of course, it's not a grain offering because it is obvious. But what other kind of what kind of sacrifice was it?
It must have been sin offering.
A sin offering.
Yeah.
Any other ideas? So why do you think it was sin offering?
Because sin offering was supposed to expiate or cleanse the person who had done sin. And whenever somebody did sin, he was supposed to die. Because in this case, the animal symbolized the death of Christ, who was supposed to actually cleanse us from the penalty of death. So that's why I think it must have been sin offering.
Okay, but there is one problem with the sin offering. Most probably, sin offering didn't exist before Sinai. So we don't have any reference to the sin offering before Sinai in the book of Genesis. The only offerings which were offered by the Israelites or patriarchs were what we can read, the burnt offerings, and most probably the peace offering as well, and grain offering as well, maybe. The sin offering was added only after Sinai.
Is it because only then was sin clearly known because God pronounced it?
Pardon?
Is it because the commandments were already given by that time, that's when now it became clear what sin is?
Okay, so we just go to a different discussion about the sin offering, about the purpose of the sin offering, and this is mostly about the book of Leviticus. And there was very famous theologian, Jacob Milgrom, and Jacob Milgrom wrote a 2-volume commentary on the book of Leviticus in Anchor Bible series. And Jacob Milgrom actually said that it is wrong to call this offering a sin offering because in some cases this offering also used when sin is not implied. Like, for example, the woman gave birth a child. After a certain number of days, she is supposed to bring a sin offering. So in this case, there is a question, what kind of sin she had committed? If, for example, she is married, it is not a child of adultery or anything like that. So everything is normal. So why should she bring the sin offering? So, and there are some other cases when there is no clear sin, and but the sin offering is required. Based on this observation, Milgrom argued, and many other theologians accepted his reasoning. And he argued that sin offering is not actually a sin offering, but it is better to call it a purification offering. That is why this term purification offering is now very common. And by the way, our Adventist theologian, Roy Gain, he studied under Milgrom, and it seems to me even his dissertation was written under the supervision of Milgrom. And he also accepted this idea, and in his book, Cult and Character, he argues about the same. So it is not a sin offering, but it is a purification offering. But the problem is in this interpretation, and some theologians do not agree with the Milgrom, because the name of the offering is Hatat. And because it is Hatat, it is supposed to be a sin offering. Yeah. Okay, so, but it is another discussion. I don't want to go to the discussion right now. What I would like to emphasize is that this offering is most probably as a burnt offering, not a sin offering, but burnt offering. So the sin offerings were added during the Sinai, but that those offerings were not famous, so they were not in operation before Sinai. And the best explanation why they couldn't exist before Sinai, first of all, if we read the description of the sin offering, there is a clear distinction how it should be done. For example, it is supposed to be if the entire congregation committed a sin, or if the high priest committed a sin. During the patriarchal time, there was no such idea of entire congregation. There was no such idea of the high priest. So it was clear that these regulations were added later. And furthermore, in some cases, the blood of the sin offering was supposed to be brought inside the sanctuary. So in order to have a sin offering, you have to have the sanctuary. Without sanctuary, the sin offering is just impossible. So for that reason, I argue that the sin offering was added later during the Sinai, but not before. But there is one more argument why we can say that this is a burnt offering. And this is related to the skin tunic, to the skin. So if you just remember, when we speak about the burnt offering, what happened to the meat or to the body of the animal which was offered as a burnt offering? remember?
Is it the priest who took ate them?
It is burnt offering. So the meat should be burnt. So we see it is Allah offering. Allah from the root Allah to go up. So the meat was supposed to be burnt completely at the altar, on the altar.
But what happened to the meat that came from this, where they got the tunic?
Pardon again?
What happened to the meat of the animal that was killed to cover Adam and Eve in the Eden?
Yes, so this is what I would like to emphasize. So this was a burnt offering, and the burnt offering was completely burnt at the altar. But the only thing that was not burnt was the skin of the burnt offering. So the burnt offering should be completely burnt.
But now that the skin was not burnt, was it then a burnt offering?
Pardon?
Now that the skin was not burnt.
Yes, yes. So that is why I argue that the offering that was offered was a burnt offering. And let me just one moment. So in Leviticus 7,
Maybe you could give us a brief break.
just a minute, we will have a break.
Oh, thank you.
So just a minute, this is Leviticus 7 and verse 8. And the priest who offers any man's burnt offering shall have for himself the skin of the burnt offering that he has offered. So do you see, it is not written in the first chapter of the book of Leviticus, it is written in chapter number 7 of the book of Leviticus, but it is clear that the skin of the burnt offering was given to the priest.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Yes, and if we assume, or most obviously it was a sin offering, and Adam got the skin of the skin offering. So what does it mean?
Adam was a priest.
Adam was a priest, correct. Adam was a priest. And it has a very, very interesting implication. So do you see, it was clear that Adam was a priest before the fall. But it looks like Adam remained a priest even after the fall.
Yeah, that's correct, Prof.
Yes, please.
That's correct. That's clear.
Yeah, it's clear.
Professor.
Yes.
What about Eve?
Oh.
Because the text says it closed both Adam and Eve.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So I believe that Eve was also a priest before the fall. Okay? But I don't think she remained a priest after the fall.
Prof?
Yes, but she got a skin as well. She got a skin as well. But according to the laws of the book of Leviticus, if a girl or a lady is a part of the family,
she partakes.
Yes, she can eat meat of the offerings. She can partake like everything that has a priest. She can also have. So in this case, there is no problem that she was also dressed in the skin garment.
She was part of the generic Adam.
Yeah, she was under Adam's priesthood.
Yes, yes. And later on, we can see that the idea of priesthood continues in chapter 4. The idea of priesthood continues in chapter 4. And the idea of enmity. Okay, let us have a break.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
After the break, we'll...
you have some questions?
We'll talk, yeah,
okay.
about this skin tunic.
Okay, okay. So we'll speak about John Walton. And do you remember he suggested a very intriguing interpretation of Genesis 1:3, and he suggested also the same interpretation of Genesis 6:9, and both of them are very, very liberal. So although he is evangelical and he considers himself evangelical, so he doesn't want to go out of this camp, but he is very, very liberal evangelical. And the book that he wrote together with Tremper Longman III is called The Lost World of the Flood: Mythology, Theology, and the Deluge Debate. So in this book, these two authors try to promote their understanding of the flood, or what happened during the flood. And as I said, their interpretation or their presentation is very, very, very liberal, in the sense that they try to find a compromise between science, modern science, and biblical teaching. So I just very, very quickly describe to you what is their position. First of all, what they say is that the Bible uses a lot of hyperbole, and we can find those hyperbole everywhere, especially in the Old Testament. But the purpose of this hyperbole is to convey a theological message. And they just describe, or they give some examples of the hyperbole. For example, the conquest of the Promised Land in Joshua. Because when you read, and it seems to me we spoke about that in our class on the historical books. So in Joshua 1:12, we can see that the conquest is presented as something complete. So all the land was conquered, every nations were conquered, so nothing remained to conquer. So the ideal conquest, you can say. But later on, in the following chapters, 13:24, the picture is completely different, because it looks like there are many, many tribes that should be conquered or expelled from the land. And there are many, many pieces of land that do not belong to the Israelites. So how they explain it? A very, very simple way. So they say that it is just a hyperbole. So when the Bible says that the entire land, whole land was conquered, it is just a hyperbolic description of the conquest. And in this case, they extend this idea of hyperbole, they extend it to the flood. And they say that in the flood narrative, we can also find how the author uses hyperbole to convey a theological meaning. For example, they said, the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. And they explain, if you take that as a bare statement of fact, then how do we explain Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God? Only the most literally minded would take this language to mean that everyone on earth had only evil motives for every act. However, the hyperbole certainly expresses well the fact that evil had reached an unprecedented level, and that God was going to act to restore order. So do you see what they say? They say that many details, when we read the story of the flood, we should understand them like hyperbole. So it is not historical. So they don't want to say that the flood didn't exist. So they take this medium position. So they said, okay, flood existed in the past, but the description of the flood is very hyperbolized. So it was not, in reality, it was not like it was described. For example, hyperbole explains the dimensions of the ark. As described in Genesis 6:15, the ark is about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. That is one large boat. The dimensions themselves lead us to believe that they are hyperbolic numbers. In other words, purposefully exaggerated for rhetorical effect to make a theological point. It is hard to imagine ancient readers taking this description as if it referred to an actual boat. There would have been nothing like it or even close to it in the ancient world. So do you see, they say that it is a very, very big boat, and in the ancient world, you cannot find anything like that. So usually the boats that, like the remains of the boats that we can have from that time are very small. So nothing like that could be found in archaeology. So that is why they simply say it is a hyperbolic description of the
denying.
Pardon?
They are denying the presence based on the other evidences. So can they also reason that there is no any other boat which could have carried the elephants and human beings at the same time?
Yeah, but do you see, let us see what they say after that. They don't believe in a global flood. That is why they don't need a big boat to save all the animals. Yeah, and what is also interesting, and by the way, they mentioned this project in their book, and the book is quite recent. So this is the real picture. And in the United States of America, Ken Ham and his team, not only him, but some other people, presented in like 5 years ago, they finished this project, and they call it Ark and Counting. So this is really a huge project, and they made a real size ark according to the dimensions given in the Bible. Of course, the shape and everything else, we do not know how it was done, but they made it as like a museum, and you can find even video on YouTube. Just search for Ark and Counting, meeting the Ark and Counting, and you will find a lot of videos about this ark. It is somewhere in Kentucky, and you can, even if you are there, you can buy a ticket and go inside and watch how everything is arranged inside. Yeah, but Walton and Tremper Longman III actually criticize this thing, and they, but of course they do it from their point of view. First of all, they say that the dimensions of the ark that was built is much bigger than in the Bible. So the Bible dimensions are lesser than that one, but everything depends on the size of the cubit or the size of this measurement that how we can transfer this ancient measurements to our modern measurements. So and also they criticize this project because they say that this ark was done with the help of modern technology, and such kind of technology didn't exist at that time. Okay, but anyway, so do you see? I just want to use this this example as a counter argument against what Walton and Longman say. So do you see? I just want to make it big a little bit. You see how small the people are, how small the people are when they compare to the ark. Okay, so the next statement or the next important question that they raise, this is the question about the global flood. And look at the reasoning, how they speak about that. So when they discuss all the details of the narrative, it looks like they agree that flood was global. And there are many arguments in the text that say about the global flood. The need to take pairs, and in some cases 7 pairs of animals, including birds, on board, indicates a worldwide flood, not just a local flood. The size of the boat indicates flood waters beyond the imagination of a local flood. That all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heaven were opened, indicates a worldwide flood. The height of the waters is 15 cubits over the mountains, and the only mountains mentioned being the sizable mountains of Ararat point to a global flood. So there are many details in the text that say that the flood was global. It was not just a local flood. Thus, it is our conclusion that Genesis 6:8 describes a worldwide, not a local flood. This conclusion leaves us with what at first read, at least from our 21st century Western perspective, is an error, or at least a contradiction. The Bible describes a worldwide flood, yet absolutely no geological evidence supports a worldwide flood. While some people believe that this means that the science must be wrong if the Bible is right, we believe that if science is right, then it leads us to a better interpretation of the biblical material, the interpretation that gets us to the original intent of the biblical author. So do you see what they say? They try to maintain the truth of the Bible on the one hand, but on the other hand, they also try to defend the science position. And because, as they say, there is no evidence, geological evidence, support a worldwide flood, so they say that we need to come back to the Bible and try to read it again in order to reinterpret it. And I think now you understand what is their position. And their position is quite simple. So because they use as a main point the idea of hyperbole, in this case, they just want to say that the description of the flood as it is given in the Bible is hyperbolic. So it is not a real description of the real event, but the description is hyperbolized, exaggerated, in order to convey a special message. We have attempted to support the idea that the rhetoric related to the flood is intentionally universal, but that it is actually the impact and significance that is universal rather than the range and scope. As a final example of this distinction, we offer the example of the Holocaust. People today might talk about the Holocaust in terms of the total annihilation of European Jewry, assuming the event in its traditional and rhetorically expressed terms. The speaker describes the event in intentionally universalistic terms, yet at the same time recognizes the hyperbole as those hearing the description also would. So the idea is that we have a hyperbolic description of the flood, and the author of the Bible, the author of the book of Genesis, intentionally describes flood as universal. And that is why when we read the Bible, it's no problem when we can see that the flood is universal according to the Bible. But it doesn't mean that this universal flood took place in the history of the world. And also, John Walton in his previous book about Genesis 1:3, he and Longman III also use a lot of parallels with the ancient Near East stories about flood. And when they bring forward those parallels, they say that there are some similarities and there are some distinctions. So, for example, they say that every ancient Near East story about the flood had the very same steps. Like, for example, gods are not happy about people, and they try to eliminate them. But one family is warned, and one family is able to escape the flood. The command is given to build a boat. They built a boat, and after that they go to the boat and they are saved. After that, the birds are sent away, but the order and the name of the birds are different in different accounts. And after that, when they go out from the flood, from the ark, after the end of the flood, they offer sacrifices. So they see that the structure of the stories are the same, almost the same in all the accounts. But of course, the details are different. The size of the boat, the time of the flood, and many other details are very, very different. So how they explain those similarities and distinctions in those stories? And they say, we believe it is better to explain the similarities and differences between the biblical and Mesopotamian flood traditions, not in terms of borrowing, but rather in terms of Mesopotamia and Israel floating in the same cultural river. So it means that those stories were circulating and they were famous both to the Mesopotamian people and to the Israelite people. And later on they were codified or they were put down into the writing. And but before they were put down, in different parts of the world they were modified. So we believe the story goes way back to a period well before the invention of writing and therefore the advent of literature. In the far distant past, though we are unable to date it now, a devastating flood killed many people. So they agree that a flood really took place, but it was not global. It was just a local flood, but it was really a great catastrophe because many people were killed. For reasons described in other parts of this book, we do not believe that flood was worldwide, but we do believe it was particularly devastating. We don't think it is possible to date the event, locate the event, or reconstruct the event in our own terms. That is not a problem because the event itself, with which everyone in the Near East is familiar, is not what is inspired. What is inspired, and thus the vehicle of God's revelation, is the literary theological explanation that is given by the biblical author. Okay, is it clear?
Very clear, Prof.
Okay. We are brought to the conclusion that Genesis 6:9 pertains to a local flood described rhetorically as a worldwide flood to make a theological point. Such a view honors both the biblical text when read in its literary and cultural context, as well as the geological evidence or lack thereof. So it's clear that the author explains or describes the flood as an universal flood, but it is just a rhetoric. In fact, there was no universal flood, but there was just a local flood. And there is no problem with the Bible because they believe that Bible is true. So they say the Bible really is true. It describes the global flood, but we shouldn't understand that the flood was really global because this is an example of hyperbolizing. And also what they say, they usually say that when the author, the biblical author, uses a hyperbole, so in those cases, the reader should understand that this is a hyperbole, and we can find this in the Bible. And they say about two ways of interpretation of the flood story. One way is a traditional way of interpretation, and according to the traditional interpretation, the flood was an act of judgment, and God executed the judgment in response to the moral degradation that had come to characterize humanity by the time of Noah. Such a view not only can be supported from analysis of the text of Genesis, but also stands as the earliest known interpretation of the flood, and as the interpretation given in the New Testament. It is therefore exegetically supported, theologically sound, and logical deduction. This is one way how it was interpreted, and they agree with this interpretation, but they also suggest a new approach to interpret the story of the flood. Another perspective, not mutually exclusive, is the suggestion that Genesis 1:11 is interested in tracking the issue of non-order, order, and disorder. In this view, the flood account focuses more on how God is re-establishing a modicum of order in the world as he uses non-order, the cosmic waters, to obliterate disorder, evil, and violence. Of course, the flood does not totally obliterate disorder, as God acknowledges in Genesis 8, but it resets the ordering process, and God indicates that the established order will not again be reset by a flood. This view focuses attention on God's continuing plan to establish order, present and future oriented, beyond the act of judging sin, past oriented. So both are legitimate perspectives. Okay, I will try to explain this perspective just in my own words. So they look at some examples in the Bible, and they say that especially in those chapters, Genesis from 1 to 11, everything goes according to the same pattern. Like God wants to make an order out of disorder. So we have this in the creation account, but after that we can see that people committed a sin. So now it looks like disorder comes again. And because of this disorder, God penetrates in order to bring everything back to order. And when he makes this disorder, he uses non-order. Okay, so is it clear or not? Because they use some of the terminology that could be confusing for us.
Professor?
Yes.
Is it different from the chaos ideology?
Oh, very similar. Very similar, because they mostly based it on the ancient Near East parallels, and they pay a lot of attention to those parallels. And do you see, it is one of the arguments. And in ancient Near East stories, this idea of chaos actually is present. So we can say that yes. So it looks like there was an order, but because of the sin, it was a disorder. So non-order is a kind of chaos that they use in order to obliterate or eliminate the disorder and to bring everything to a new order. And finally, they pay attention to the covenant, because do you see, when Noah came out of the ark, the first thing that God is doing, he made a covenant with Noah, and not only with Noah, but with all other living creatures of the world. And they say that the covenant is like a new way how to deal with disorder that occurs in this world. So this is the pattern that they follow. The flood story fits into the pattern established by the account of the first sin and continued by the narrative concerning Cain and Abel. These are stories of sin followed by a divine judgment speech and the ultimate execution of judgment. However, between the judgment speech and the judgment itself, we have seen the consistent mention of a token of grace. Thus, these stories highlight three main theological points. Humans are sinners, God consistently judges sinners, and God remains gracious toward his sinful creatures. Okay? And we can see that this is repeated in every story in the book of Genesis. Like, for example, the first people committed a sin. God executed judgment upon them, and he, except being a judge, he also provides some mercy so that they can start again. And we can see it happens in the case of Adam and Eve. It happens in the case of Abel and Cain, and it happens again in the case of global, or not, they don't believe in global flood, but just in case of flood. The flood account specifically has the role of showing how God reestablished order after bringing the waters of the non-ordered cosmos to wipe out the disorder that had come to dominate the antediluvian world. In this way, the flood account recapitulates creation. That is why the narrator includes the story. He is showing how God had worked to bring about order in the past, creation and flood. And this serves as an introduction to Yahweh's strategy to advance order yet again through the covenant. The covenant is an order-bringing strategy using the mechanism of election, relationship, and revelation as the foundation for reestablishing his presence on earth. Okay, so do you have any questions about that?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, please.
I have two issues, and I would like to know how they reconcile them.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'm talking about the global, the flood being a global or local.
Mm-hmm.
One, how do they react on the discovery, archaeology discovery, which proves that the flood was global? Only that Middle East, that's where the world's highest population was. And also, how do they comment or connect it with the Jesus's, analogy a reference when he says, when he talks about it during Noah's time, the coming of the Son of Man will be like Noah's time.
Okay, let me start with the second one. About Jesus. Jesus says nothing that the flood, about the globality of the flood. So Jesus just uses this example to show that the same that happened during the flood or before the flood, the same would happen in the before he is coming back. So that's all. So there is no any contradiction with the Jesus' words. This is the first issue, yes, or the second one. And the first one, you ask about archaeological discoveries. First of all, we cannot speak about archaeology because archaeology, doesn't tell us much about the flood, and it cannot tell us much about the flood because according to the biblical story, everything was destroyed, so nothing should remain after the flood. Yes, but they mostly speak about geology, and they cannot find. They appeal to science, and they just, because they are not scientists, they're just scholars, biblical scholars, so they don't understand in many biological, chemical, or environmental issue. So they say they refer to the achievements of the science, and they say, according to the science, there was nothing like that in the past. So we cannot find any support of the flood in modern science. Yes, what we can say about the creationists? The creationists usually explain the geological column as evidence of the flood. And they say that this geological column didn't appear as a result of many years, but they describe it as a result of the flood. So flood is responsible for the geological column according to the creationists. So did I answer your question?
Yes, Prof.
Okay, any other issues?
Yes, Prof.
Yes, Prof. Okay, Bioma, just put forward your question.
Nathan, speak first.
Okay, something that I did not get clearly, and I'm seeking for your clarification kindly. Did we say that though the Bible portrays a global flood, the flood was local? I didn't get that point quite clearly.
Okay, so what they say like this.
Okay.
Global flood was local. Real flood was local. There was no global flood because science doesn't tell us about the global flood.
Okay.
But the Bible describes it as universal. So what is that?
Okay.
And they said there is no problem with that because the Bible, it describes it as universal on purpose in order to convey some theological message. And we shouldn't understand that the Bible, in this case, erroneous, makes an error when it describes, because the biblical authors themselves indicate or give us, help us to understand that this is an hyperbole. Okay?
Okay. Yes.
So this is what they say. This is what
that is Longman and
Walton.
And
Walton, yes.
Walton, yeah.
So
okay.
you know
Thank
Walton. You already know Walton from
yes.
perspective. Yes.
Yeah, Prof.
Yes.
Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, it's clear that these people do not believe that the Bible has all the answers. They place the Bible for its own time and for its own limitations. If they believe in evolutionary creation, that is that the earth was covered with water before God began to create, depending on the time they assigned to it. Why wouldn't they believe in the universal flood, the covering of the earth again with water? If they believe in theistic evolution, why wouldn't they believe that the earth again was covered with water as God commanded? So it's just that they don't want to place any final value or final answer or final authority on the Bible.
Yeah, if you speak about the authority of the Bible, they try to be conservative, and they emphasize in their book that they believe that the Bible is true. So what they believe. So
yes, Prof.
what is written in the Bible, the matter is just a matter of interpretation, how it is interpreted.
Yeah.
So
I took time. I read Walton's article. He places final source of truth majorly on ancient Near East sources and modern science.
Yeah, it's true. It's also true. So he depends very much in his interpretation on ancient Near Eastern stories, and he is really like a professional in this area, and several books that he wrote about that, and some of them are not bad. Some of them are not bad. I cannot say that everything that he wrote is rubbish. No, he has some interesting ideas, and some of the books are good, especially when he describes these ancient Near East parallels and the worldview of those people and how it could influence the worldview of the biblical authors. So those books are good. Yes, but his interpretation of the story is, of course, terrible because it undermines the foundation of the Bible.
And then, sir, and the size of the ark, they believe that the ancient people didn't have the capacity of building ark of such magnitude.
Yes, they don't believe that they could do this. And that is why they say it is a hyperbolization. So it is exaggeration of the size of the ark. And also they don't, according to their interpretation, they don't need to have a big ark because the big ark is needed only in case of saving all the animals. But if the flood is not global, but just a local flood, so in this case, no sense of saving animals. Animals will survive in some other places which were not affected by the flood. By the way, they don't try to reconstruct, as they say, the true events. And they say, if you remember, that event is not inspired. So what really happened, it doesn't matter. How big was the flood, how many people were saved. It is not the point of the story. The point of the story is in a different layer, in different dimension. This is a theological point. And in this case, the author made sense when it made sense for the author to exaggerate it in order to convey the message. And the message is very simple. So like all people, as the author said, corrupted themselves, and something was needed in order to save the situation.
Yeah, Prof, one more thing.
Yeah.
If they claim to be conservatives, didn't they read where God says that he will not destroy the earth again with flood? That's Genesis chapter 9, verse 11.
So what was the question?
I'm saying that God himself said that he will not destroy the world again with flood. That is found in chapter 9 of
9.
yeah, verse 11. So I don't know what they are saying about this text. God himself said that the flood was universal.
Oh, and this is also when the author says about a universal flood. Everywhere when a universal flood is mentioned, it is just a exaggeration. Yes.
Okay. I'm rested.
Yeah, so this is their point of view. Okay, just the last forum assignment will be about that. Will be about this book and how can we, what kind of counter arguments we can find in order to say that this position is wrong. Okay, this will be the last forum assignment for you. This is about this, and the book. I was able to download the book of Walton and Longman if you need it, of course, if you need it, because maybe somebody, if you would like to look at it,
Yes, we need it.
just to understand their position better. But the only problem is that I found the book only in MOBI format, but not in PDF format. I can add it to our folder, the book, but it is just in MOBI format. So it means that you need to have a kind of reader, MOBI reader. This is like there are many softwares like this, and these are for free on the internet. Okay, so let's continue. Let's continue. And now I will skip the 4th and 5th chapter, but of course we will come back anyway to those chapters when we discuss another important issue, and this is the issue about the sons of God. So what can we say about the sons of God? And this is a very, very debatable issue, and many points of view there are about these sons of God, who the sons of God were in Genesis chapter 6. And there are several lines of interpretation. And one of them is, and it is very, very popular, especially among the evangelicals, they say that sons of God in chapter 6 are the angels. And in fact, this interpretation or this way of interpretation is very, very old. We don't know exactly when did it emerge, when it emerged, but what we know, just, and I gave you the references here. For example, a Septuagint, but not all manuscripts of the Septuagint, but just Codex Alexandrinus has here angeloi to instead of huoi to. So the sons of God, and they say the angels of God. So it should be angelon, maybe angelon to, because it's absolute genitive. The angels of God saw the daughters of man, that they are good, and so on and so forth. So this is just in one codex. It's Codex Alexandrinus. Also, the same interpretation we can find in Josephus in Antiquities, but most probably, yes, Josephus based it upon some other text that had existed before him, like the Book of Jubilees and First Enoch. In First Enoch, we have this interpretation. In the Book of Jubilees, we have this interpretation. Philo also interpreted it like this. But in Philo, we can have some different ideas, because on the one hand, or in one place, he says about the angels, but in other place, he says about like good man or something like this. Yes, so, and in some other pseudo-epigraphs, we can find this interpretation that the sons of God are angels. But what is interesting, we cannot find it in ancient Jewish interpretation. For example, the Targums and the rabbinic literature are anonymous in viewing the sons of God as human beings. Like, for example, Targum and Kelos reads it sons of princes or great men. And Targum Pseudo-Jonathan the same. Targum Neofiti, son of judges. Tosefta interprets sons of God as men of the generation of the flood. And Midrash Rabbah also understands it as the sons of judges and as leaders, and so on and so forth. So we can see that in Jewish tradition, it was not the angels who had those sexual contacts with the daughters of men, but these are just people. And one also interesting text we can find in Dead Sea Scrolls, where we have this: when the Most High gave to the nations the inheritance, when he divided mankind, and mankind is Bnei Adam, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number. And look, the Masoretic text has sons of Israel, but one of the Qumran scrolls have sons of God. So exactly the same expression. And what is interesting here, you can see the sons of God are opposed to the sons of men. And the sons of God are clearly the people of Israel. And sons of men are all other people. So this is how it was interpreted in the past. You can see that in Jewish tradition, it is very often translated as sons of the prince, sons of the judges, and sons of some mighty people. And the word Elohim, and this is probably the source of this interpretation, could be understood, the word Elohim, could be understood as superlative. So what does it mean? Like when somebody wants to say that this is a big city, the biggest city. So he can say Ir Elohim, Ir Elohim. So city of God, and in this case it could be like the biggest one. So it is less superlative degree. And in this case, the phrase sons of God could be translated as mighty ones, the rulers, or son of the rulers, or son of the judges. And we can see that judges is used, especially in the book of Exodus. The word Elohim is used in the book of Exodus to designate judges. Like, for example, in Exodus 21, it says, if a slave wants to remain with the master forever, so the master should bring him to Elohim. And in some translations, it is translated as to bring him before the judges. And he should pierce his ear, and it would be a sign that he voluntarily wanted to be a slave of his master. And some other texts, they also use this Elohim for judges. So that is why it is another way how interpreted, and we can find that it occurs mostly in the rabbinic writings or Jewish rabbinic writings.
Prof,
and yes.
Could it be the source of today's reference to judges while in court? They are always called my lord, my lord.
Again, please. What do you mean?
When you are in a court, today's courts, these courts, and the judge is presiding over, they always refer to them as my lord, my lord.
Oh, I don't know about this tradition.
Yeah,
but
any court, Any court anyway, actually, the judges, when they are presiding over a case.
Yes, I don't know the history of this tradition. Yes,
Okay.
but by the way, in Exodus 21, it could be interpreted differently. So we shouldn't interpret it as judges to bring before the judges, but it could be just to bring him before Elohim, before God. But in some other cases, for example, Psalm 82, where judges are really called Elohim, and we can understand them as Elohim judges. So it's possible. But this is the source of Jewish interpretation of this text. So some sons of the princes or sons of some judges, some famous people, they just have this relationship with the woman. And of course, the last interpretation is that sons of God are just another way to speak about pious people. And we can find some textual support for this interpretation. For example, in Deuteronomy 14:1, you are the sons of the Lord your God. You shall not cut yourselves or make any baldness on your foreheads for the dead. So God called people of Israel, you are my sons, you are sons of God. And the same in Exodus when Moses says to Pharaoh that Israel is the firstborn son. So in this case, Israel is called a son. And we can understand sons of God as God-fearing people. Yes, and yes, but in order to choose which interpretation is better, we need to discuss one more important issue, and this is the issue about Nephilim. Because do you see they have like a very interesting interpretation. These are fallen angels who entered the relationship with the women, and to fall in Hebrew is nafal, and those people who were born to this union between sons of God and daughters of man are Nephilim. So it is very closely associated, and also they are described as very strong and big people according to some versions, and because of this some people believe that this Nephilim, and Septuagint translates them as giants. So giants were born because of this contact. So we can understand that the angels, strong, like who are superior to people, have this contact with the people. So the result was people were born who were giants, who were very, very big. So this is the Hebrew text. And Nephilim were in the land in those days. And also after that, when sons of God came to the sons of daughters, and they gave birth for them. They were Giborim, or military people, strong people, which are from the eternity, the people of the name. So this is just a literal translation of what we have in this verse. So let us try to understand who are those Nephilim were. As I said, Septuagint translates Nephilim as gigantes, or giants. So the Nephilims are giants, and Septuagint understands them as giants. And in order to understand what this word means, let us see how often it occurs in the Bible and what it means in the Bible. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim, and we seem to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So do you see those here? Nephilims are associated with the giants. And probably because of that, we have this translation in the Septuagint, that Nephilim are the giants. Or another text in Deuteronomy 1:28. Where are we going up? Our brothers have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and fortified up to heaven. And besides, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. So do you see the enemies are described here as people who are taller, who are greater than us, and the sons of Anakim are also there, and most probably the sons of Anakim, they associated the sons of Anakim with also big people. Or, for example, Deuteronomy 2, the Emim formerly lived there, a people great and many and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. And Rephaim is also somebody who are associated with a big height or big size. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit. So do you see the height of this Rephaim was emphasized even here in this verse. So that is why many people believe that Nephilim are, in other words, for giants. And this aspect is emphasized here. So what we can say about that? Or I would like to hear anything from you. So what can we say about that?
Prof, for me, it's interesting.
Okay, but do you agree that Nephilim are big people?
Actually, I'm not much concerned with the giantness, but to know the word itself as standing for the fallen, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So
now I can see that Genesis 6 verse 4 makes meaning for me. It makes meaning now very well, because I was wondering, we are all human beings and we are fallen. How can others be designated as sons of men and others sons of God? But today, because of Nephilim, I've understood the thought of the writer.
Okay. So now, do you see why I mentioned those Nephilim? Is because it is one of the arguments for sons of God as angels, because do you see, because of these marriages, those big people were born, like giants were born, and this is explained. That they were angels, and that is why they produced such kind of progeny. Okay, but the text of the book of Genesis doesn't tell us anything about the height or the size of those Nephilim, but the Nephilim are characterized with this: Hema ha-giborim asher me'olam anshe Hashem. So the Bible doesn't say that Nephilim are the big people. For example, yes, it's true that Anak and Anakim were big people, And it's true that Anakim were from Nephilim, but it doesn't mean necessarily that Nephilim were also big people, or that the Nephilim, the idea of being big, is inherent to the word Nephilim. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Yes, the fact that Anak and Anakim were big doesn't mean that Nephilim also means that these are big people. Because it could be that Nephilim is like a more broad idea than Anakim. Okay? So some of the Nephilim could be big, but it's not necessarily that every Anakim is big. So, but pay attention that the Nephilim are Giborim and people of the name. So what does it mean, Giborim? Gibor, this is a famous word in the Bible, which means like vigorous, strong. Nimrod also was a Gibor, and sometimes say that it could be translated as a despot, or hero, or champion, or man of the battle, warrior, bodyguard. Yes, so all these ideas are behind the word Gibor. And what conclusion can we do is that Giborim actually means something like military people, people who are fighting, people who are strong or military educated, or something like that. So this is what Giborim means. Is it clear?
Yes, bro.
Okay. And do you see, it is very well correlated with what is described, or what is with the description of the people before the flood. First of all, we can see like two lines of people, and one line is the descendants of Cain. And it's very interesting that the line of Cain, the last representative of this line of Cain is Lamech. And do you remember in the Genesis chapter 4, Lamech is presented as the one who killed a people, and he is boasting to his wives that he killed a person. So we can understand his words mostly like a boast. So he says, okay, I killed a man, and in fact, I will not have any consequences because he mentioned Cain, who, if somebody kills Cain, so he will be revenged 7 times. And he says, for me, it will be even more. So this reference to the violence we can find in the book of Genesis chapter 4. And chapter 6 also emphasizes this violence before the flood. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. Violence here is the word Hamas, and actually it means like people are killing each other, people are violent. And also, why we speak about the violence of the people before the flood is what is written in Genesis chapter 9. And in Genesis chapter 9, we can see that God makes special provision about a safety of human life. And he says that if somebody kills another person, the God will revenge for that. And in this case, it is clear that God emphasizes something that was a huge problem before the flood, and he doesn't want this problem to be repeated. So in this case, we can see that the world before the flood was really very, very violent, and people just killed each other, didn't respect the life of each other, and this is emphasized by the Bible. And also, those people, Nephilim, are called people of name, people of their name. And this is also a very interesting expression, and in the Bible it is always negative. When somebody wants to make a name for himself, Excuse me. If somebody wants to make a May for himself, it's always considered to be a kind of rebellion. For example, the builders of the Babel Tower were also characterized as people of the name, or they wanted to make a name for themselves. So this is like a bad thing. It looks like they repeat the rebellion of the people that happened during before the flood. And one more interesting thing, so that also emphasizes that the people before the flood were sinners, or the event or the fact that they married daughters of man was a kind of sin, is the resemblance of the description of that to the description to the sin of Eve. So Eve saw the fruit, that fruit was good, and took it, lakach, and the same is said about the sons of God. They saw, ra'ah, the daughters of man, that they are tov, or beautiful, and they also lakach, took them for the wives. So it's like a repetition of the sin of Eve. So what we can see when we speak about that story about the Nephilim, it is clear that the Bible doesn't say anything about the size of those Nephilim or how tall they are, at least in this portion of the Bible. But the Bible emphasizes two other aspects, that they were violent and they were rebellious against God. And why does the author use this story as a prologue to the story of the flood? Do you see one of the biggest questions that we may ask when we read this part of the Bible is about the destiny of the pious people. So we can see like two lines, the lines of Cain, and in this life there are only bad people. So all of them are bad. Nothing is said good about them. And the line of Seth. And the line of Seth is supposed to be people who are God-fearing people. So they like God and they want to worship God. And in this case, there is a big question, because in the beginning of chapter 6, we can see that the Lord said that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So it looks like God said that nobody remained faithful to him. And now there is a question, so where the descendants of all this generation from Seth to Noah, where did these pious people disappear? And most probably this story in the beginning of chapter 6 is just a clarification of this fact. So what happened with this many descendants of righteous people who were supposed to be righteous? So if we assume that they are called sons of God, so what happened? These sons of God, or the descendants of Seth, married descendants of Cain or other people. And because of that, the next generation that was born to those people were the generation of Nephilim. So the generation of people who are fallen people. So the generation of people who kill each other, they are very violent, and they are very destructive by themselves. So most probably this story in the book of Genesis, in the beginning of the book of Genesis, just describes what happened to those many descendants of pious people. So what happened to them? And I believe that this is a very important issue, especially when we need to speak about that with our young people, because many problems happens when because of the intermarriages, and usually the biggest problem is the children of such intermarriages with the non-Adventist or non-Christian. So in this case, if the parents are Christians, but or one parent is Christian, so it doesn't mean that the sons or the children of this marriage would be also Christian, but most probably they would be like here. They will be like Nephilim. So do you have any question about that?
Maybe the question I can ask, are the Canaanites that Joshua drove out connected to Cain?
Connected to?
Cain.
No.
The son.
No, they're not connected to Cain. And it is obvious from the chapter 10 of the book of Genesis. Because do you see, all the descendants of Cain were killed by the flood. So they didn't survive the flood. And only from Noah, we can have this a new world began from Noah. And Canaan is a son of Ham. And he is cursed, but he doesn't have any connection to Cain. Okay.
Yes, Prof.
Yes. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I want to ask something as to why pious people disappear. Like you rightly said, marriage, evil association corrupts good manners. The Bible tells us that.
Yes.
That was also what led to the downfall of Solomon. He married wives from hidden nations, and they led him to idolatry. And another thing I want to chip in is maybe some of these righteous people, God allowed them to die.
Yeah, before, like for example, Lamech and
Yes.
Methuselah, they died just before the flood.
Yeah.
Oh, of course,
So
some people try to speculate about that. For example, the year of Methuselah's death is the year of the flood.
Flood.
Yes. And some people try to say that he maybe died in the waters of flood. But of course, it is just a speculation. The Bible doesn't tell us anything about that.
Okay. That's just my thoughts, sir.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yeah, by the way, you mentioned Solomon.
Yes.
I just came across one interesting idea about Solomon and about his prayer. Do you see, today we mentioned that he prayed and he asked to discern between good and evil in his prayer. So what is interesting, later on in the book of Proverbs, by the way, the book of Proverbs and this wisdom literature is very well related to the Genesis story of creation of Adam and Eve, about everything. So do you see in this, in the Proverbs, there is a saying that to obey God is the tree of life. To obey God is the tree of life. And it's very interesting that Solomon is asking to discern between good and evil. And it looks like he got this wisdom, but it was not the wisdom from God, but it was just like a human wisdom. And this human wisdom led him to go away from God. So, and in this case, some people interpret this good and evil like a quest of wisdom. So people, Adam and Eve, were tempted to be wise. But this wisdom is not a wisdom from above, not the wisdom from God, but this is like a human wisdom. And this wisdom doesn't bring to a good result. And yes, in the book of Proverbs, we can see that this is also like a good connection with this story, because there is also Lady Wisdom in the book of Proverbs and Lady Folly. And Lady Folly actually tries to be like Lady Wisdom. They tries to imitate Lady Wisdom. But in fact, we can see that there is a big difference between them. Okay, so it was just something that is not related directly to our topic. So the structure, okay, is clear. Sons of God took the wives from the daughters of man, and the Lord set 120 years for the humanity. And after that, again, about sons of God, Nephilim appeared because sons of God married the daughters of man. And after that, the Lord decides to blot out the population of the earth. So it is a kind of parallelism here, but not a complete parallelism. So do you see, it looks like this, we can see some chronological order in these events. Like, for example, sons of God took the wives from the daughters of men, and the Lord said, okay, I will give you 120 years more just to see what happened. But what happened after that? After that, we can see that Nephilim appeared, and Nephilim were just very, very sinful people. And when God saw those Nephilim, he said, okay, let me destroy everything on the earth. So this is just the structure of this narrative. And of course, the only person who remained is Noah. And the naming of Noah is very, very interesting. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands. So this is a kind of a prophecy. So Lamech gave a prophecy about Noah. And he says that the destiny of Noah is related very well with the, so Noah is supposed to save them. And here he uses the language of the curse during the creation, not the curse, but the punishment or consequences of sin. So the consequences of sin were a painful toil of the land. And he also mentioned the ground that is cursed. So he refers back to the curse of the fall. Yes, but what is also interesting, that the name Noah is derived from the verb Noach, and the verb Noach means rest. So this name is related to the rest. So what is expecting Lamech, that Noah, maybe he expects him to be a Messiah or somebody who will change the situation that happened after the flood, after the fall, when a man is supposed to work very hard without relief, and he lost this rest. And now Lamech says that Noah is the one who will return it back, or maybe it has some reference to that. So he will bring relief. So the curse of the land would be somehow eliminated or something changed. So this is the meaning of the name Noah. And it has some more connections with the story of flood, because he says Naham here, he will give us relief. And later on we can see in chapter 6 when God said that he, Naham, he regretted because he created a man. And also what is interesting, the name Noah, if it is read vice versa, so we will have the word hen, and hen is mercy. And it is also like a pun in chapter 6 and verse 9, it seems to me, or yeah, 9, when it says that Noah found grace. So Noah found hen. So these two words, the name of Noah and hen, grace, are mentioned in the same verse, but they are the same letters, just in different order. Okay, so I believe that you know this one, okay. So this is the question about why God destroyed the entire population of the first world. And when we read chapter 6 and verses 11 to 13, it's clearly stated that the problem is that people already destroyed themselves. And the word shahat that is used here, it has two meanings: to kill and to corrupt. So when we read it, it is very clear. Now the earth was corrupt, shahat, in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence, Hamas. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and again shahat. For all flesh had corrupted, shahat, their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I have determined to make the end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy, shahat, them with the earth. So the idea here is that God decided to destroy people only after he saw that the land is already destroyed. And this is a good illustration of the principle that God will never destroy something that is good. And God will never destroy or kill somebody who is a bearer of his image. So that is why we can see that in this case, it is clear that God doesn't destroy those who could be saved, only those who already corrupted themselves. So, and after that we have a flood story, and let me just go very quick through the flood story. You probably know that the flood story is based as a chiasm, and in the middle of the chiasm you have this God remembered Noah, and this is language of the covenant, God remembered Noah, because we can see that the same phrase occurs very often in the language of the covenant. When God remembered, so it means that he started to walk as a covenant partner. And we can see it in the book of Genesis, and especially in the book of Genesis, when it says that God remembered the covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and it means that he started acting on behalf of his people based on the covenant. And this expression doesn't mean that God has forgotten about Noah. It's the language of the covenant. God acts according to Noah's earlier promise. Such expression can often be found in the Bible. This word often occurs when God wants to intervene to save his people or give help. And it is clear that the flood is described as a recreation, or is opposite to creation. And it's very interesting. Like, for example, the first statement in the chapter 6 says that God says, my spirit will not be always with them. And what happened? He allowed spirit to be with them for 120 years. And after that, the spirit was taken from the earth. And what happened after that? The destruction came. And the way backward is also described with the presence of the spirit. For example, yes, and God made a wind blow over the earth, and the wind in Hebrew is also ruach, and the waters subsided. So do you see? It looks like spirit was returned back to the earth, and because it was returned back to the earth, the flood stopped. The flood stopped. And also we can see this, the word tehom that is used, and it also like a reference back to creation. And the description of those who died is the language of the creation. And it looks like the flood is something opposite to the creation. Like during the creation, they got separated waters, but now the waters are mixed up again. So it is returning to the state of the earth before the creation, when Tehom, or ocean, covered all the earth. So it is, the flood is described as something opposite to creation. Okay, the chronology of the flood. Yeah, it's a very interesting idea that I found in one article. And the author of the article make a connection between the end of the flood and the crossing of the Red Sea. And he says that the end of the flood, when the ark came, so found rest or rested on the mountains of Ararat. So it happens in the 7th month on the 17th day. So he made a calculation, and this 17th day of the 7th month was the same as the day when the people of Israel crossed the Red Sea, and they were saved from the sea. Yes, and people were also Noah was saved from the flood. So it's very interesting parallel, especially if you take into consideration that Moses in the book of Exodus is presented as second Noah. So he was also in the very beginning of his story. He was also saved in the ark, because the basket that his mother made for him, the word for this basket is the same as the word for the ark of Noah. So this is just an interesting idea. And of course, we can see that the idea of remnant is also present in the book of Genesis here for the first time, when we don't have the noun sha'ar, but we have the verb sha'ar, only God remained. So he is the remnant of the entire world. And after that, this idea of remnant became very, very prominent. So also what is interesting, and it seems to me I took it from the book of Selhammer, that we can find some parallels between flood story and the story of purification of the house, or purification of a man who was a leper after he was healed. So we have many parallels between these two rituals, between the ritual and the story of the flood. And it actually tells us that leprosy in the Bible is a symbol of sin. This is a symbolic description of the sin. In this case, we can see that flood was also like a ritual of purification from the sin of the people. Okay, so this is everything that I wanted to tell you for today. Do you have any questions or anything?
Yes, Prof. I have a question.
Yes, please.
In Genesis chapter 6, verse 7, where God expresses a kind of regret or being sorry for making man. Does that not question a hint about his omniscient?
Again, what is the question?
In chapter 6, verse 7, where God expresses being sorry or for making man. Does that not put a question on omniscience?
The meaning of this
I am sorry.
Yeah, I am sorry, or God regrets.
Yeah.
So this is the word that is used here is the word nacham. Naham. Yes, and what the interpreters say that this verb Naham, the original meaning of this word is like to make a deep breath, like like something like this. Yes,
okay.
And it describes just not the fact that God repented or
Okay.
God, how to say, changed his mind or something like this, but it describes just a deep sorry of God because of the state of the people. So it is not because he repented, because for repentance we have another verb, and the verb shuv, and shuv is like turning around.
Yeah, turning around.
In one direction, and I decided to go in the opposite direction. So this is shuv, but
okay, Prof.
Yes, Naham is more. But I think it could be a good topic for a paper if you can try to understand what this verb means and try to analyze different usages of this verb in different contexts and how it elucidates the story of the flood. Yes.
Which verb, Prof?
Naham. So where is it? Yeah, grieved, and it grieved. And this is Atsaf. Is it so? The Lord said, I will create it, face of the land.
Okay, Prof, maybe I may try it.
For I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, I am sorry. This one. Naham. This is just an idea. I don't want to push you into this direction. Just.
It's possible I might look towards that direction.
Yeah, just look at this. If you find something interesting, you can proceed. If not, you can choose something else.
All right, thank you, Prof.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so I think that we can stop for today, and tomorrow we have our last day, and tomorrow maybe let us do like this. I will not lecture anymore. If you have any questions, you can ask them. So we can just discuss your topics about the paper. So it is not for grade, it is just for us, it is like a brainstorm. And if somebody has not found topic for a paper, so it's time to think about it. So tomorrow we can discuss it, and we can help each other. Because I found it's very, very helpful when for the students when we can discuss it together, and we can see how it's better to develop the topic from the paper from your topic. Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yes. Please, I have sent something to you.
Yes, I saw it already. I saw it already.
So I'll be expecting your feedback, sir.
Yes, I will do it as soon as possible. So until tomorrow, you will get your feedback.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but for me, it looks nice. It looks nice.
Okay.
But you need to find some other papers that were written about that, and I will send you a link to one journal.
Okay.
That has some discussion about that. So you need, because as I understand, you will discuss in your paper these two ideas about desire and mashal. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So you need to look at different interpretations of that. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let us pray. Our dear Heavenly Father, thank you very much for this class and for this opportunity for us to study together and to try to penetrate to the meaning and understand the meaning of your word, and especially those very, very important chapters which describe the creation of this world and describe your love that you showed to the people so many times. And our dear Lord, now I would like to ask you a special blessing upon all our students. So please be with them and help them to be successful in everything. And let your Holy Spirit be with them and guide them and help them to cope with the challenges and to be good people of God in this world. So we need your Spirit. So please help us to have it and to be filled with it every day of our life. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Okay, thank you very much.
Amen.
And
Amen.
see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Professor. See you tomorrow.